Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time is a review of the 1990 survival horror exploitation movie, Blood Games. This film is honestly pretty lame. I was not a fan of this one. I know there are some fans out there of this. I just didn't really find it to be that entertaining or that fun to watch. I wasn't totally bored by it. It wasn't one of those films where it was a chore to sit through, or like I barely survived it by the end of the movie, but it just didn't really register that much. It didn't really leave that much of an impression on me. Honestly, I saw it like last night, and it's already been battered out of my brain because like it really that's how much of an impression it left on me. It didn't resonate that well at all. Like there were certain scenes that stuck with me, but not for the right reasons. And the idea behind it is interesting, but it never really lives up to its full potential, if you ask me. The film's directed by Tanya Rosenberg, and she's an equal opportunity offender. And what do I mean by that? Well, her direction is shitty. It's as bad and as awful as some of the worst direction I've seen by a man. So it goes to show you that women can direct movies as terribly as men can. She didn't really go on to do much of anything after this. I think she didn't do anything after this, if I remember correctly. She didn't direct a single movie after this, and for a good reason. Because she's bad at it. She sucks. She has a penchant for overuse of slow-mo, and so much slow-mo that it's an overdose. It's not overuse, that's putting it lightly. She overdoses on slow-mo. Just too many shots in this film are done in slow motion, and there are a couple shots where it kind of added to the mood and atmosphere, but then after that it just became extremely repetitive and annoying, and it just felt like the movie needed to be padded out because it wasn't going to reach an hour and a half if it didn't have all this fucking slow-mo. I've always hated that in films, especially direct-to-video cheap jack movies where they feel like, well, we don't have enough meat on the bone, so we're going to inject some slow-mo steroids into it in the hopes that people won't notice it, but it's misshapen and it's gross, and you notice it right away, just like you would if something got injected with steroids and it just got all swelled up. It's just one of those. It's just a glaring, obvious problem with the direction and with this film. Also, she doesn't really get that much out of her actors. There's a lot of stuff where honestly there should have been more takes, but she didn't bother or didn't have the money. The action sequences, they're not exciting or thrilling because she doesn't know how to direct them very well. The sequences are supposed to be suspenseful or scary, are the complete opposite because she doesn't know how to do any of that. It's just one of those films where this really would have benefited a lot from a much better director. A more seasoned veteran director would have made this film so much better, because you have a total amateur doing this movie. It just does not do the film justice, because you have a director who just isn't really that good at directing. It's her first time directing the movie, and there are some times where first time directors, they knock it out of the park. Blood Games is not one of those films. Tanya Rosenberg is not one of those directors. Whether that really is a Tanya Rosenberg or not. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's some, like, really shitty director who took a pseudonym. But as far as I know, that's not the case. It has a screenplay by Craig L. Clyde, James L. Hennessy, and George P. Saunders. And this script is a mess. This is an awful script. So it's a good idea, the idea of a all-female baseball team who ends up having to fend for themselves and survive an oncoming onslaught of bad guys. That's not really necessarily a bad idea. In fact, that makes it stand out from a lot of other films like it, these survival horror movies, because most of the time it's just men. It's a group of men. There might be a girl, but she's not really the main character or one of the main characters. She's just along for the ride. In this film, it's all women, and they even lose their mentor and the man who's been trying to protect them all this time. They even lose him, so they're on their own. So that idea and concept, it's solid, but the film itself is anything but. So it's one of those movies where it does not know how to pick the right tone. So for half the film, it's a dumb redneck action comedy. Really, that's a great way to put it. It's a dumb redneck action comedy with a side of sleaze and some TNA. That's really what it is. But once the girls get off the bus and have to survive the wilderness and try to stay one step ahead of the redneck hunters when they're hunting them down, the tone changes completely, and there's a scene that just comes completely out of left field, like a baseball, like a line drive, just right into your fucking skull. And it's a rape scene. It's a really intense, played straight rape scene where a poor girl is getting raped in the ass in the woods, and it's a part of this movie where there's lines of dialogue like, "You piss like you drink. Well, you drink like you piss." You know, and you're just like, okay, so that does not work. That's a total fail. I personally do not feel that this is a kind of tone that will ever work. There's not a single movie that I can think of off the top of my head that can be jokey and silly and full of dumb redneck humor and then have a serious rape scene and have that work. You can't have your cake and eat it too in this instance. You can't be silly, dumb redneck comedy with some action and TNA and then have a rape scene. You just can't do that. Blood Games is a perfect example of this. You can't have that dynamic because it's forced and it doesn't work. It's a mix that is way too volatile. It's way too dangerous, and not in a good way. It just explodes in your face. It doesn't help either that these rednecks, before the rape scene, were painted as total goofballs. Like, none of them were intimidating. None of them were scary. Nothing was ever played straight with them, except for the lead guy, the lead villain, Mino Collins. But even, I didn't really buy him as that intimidating, so that didn't really work either. So, for the most part, you got these bumbling, dumb rednecks, and they're not played straight. They're not supposed to be a threat, apparently. I guess they're just there. The girls just have to stay one step ahead of them. It almost reminded me of a Smoking the Bandit type of scenario. And then rape scene. Like, it just doesn't, that you can't drop that bombshell in that kind of movie. It just does not work. Period. And that goes right to the screenplay. The script has some fun lines of dialogue that are kind of funny in a sleazy, dumb way. Like I said, the overall idea, the main concept of the film, I don't mind. Although I personally thought the film was more entertaining and more solid when the girls were in the bus trying to stay one step ahead of these dumb rednecks. But that's just me personally. Once it got to the woods, it became pretty sluggish because they split up, and then it's trying to be a stalk and slash movie, and it just wasn't very suspenseful. Another big reason why the film didn't really have that much chills or thrills is the fact that the script doesn't really do that much to give any of the characters a shred of character development. They seem like paper cutouts, especially the women. It's nice to see that there's women, there's a group of women in a film like this, but they're interchangeable with each other for the most part. I mean, there's one girl, Donna, who's the tough one, and then there's the lead girl, Babe. But the rest of them are, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to really find any defining traits about them, character-wise, other than their appearance. That's really it. Or the fact that one of them is a little shy and scared. That's really all you get with these characters. So when they're in danger, it's a lot of indifference, because you're just like, I mean, I don't really care. I don't really care what happens to them. It's horrific what happens to one of the girls when she gets raped, but I mean, other than that scene, I didn't really care about that character. So I mean, the film just does not do a good job making you give a shit about these characters. They also don't really have like the best chemistry with one another, and they aren't really that funny either. So it's not like, I mean, there's a little bit of some fun stuff in the locker room, but that isn't really carried over for the rest of the movie. So it's not like that, and it's not like that kind of movie where you have girls with charisma who are just fun to watch, and maybe they don't have a lot of character development, but the fact that they're entertaining is enough. No, there's nothing like that in this. And also, like I said, the main villains are just so poorly written. They're not intimidating, they're not scary, and I honestly come across as annoying most of the time, just like they're just like annoying little gnats that the girls have to swat away, and they're just taking too long to do it. The cast, it's not really that strong. You got Laura Albert, who she's really nice to look at, and she's gorgeous, but she's not a good actress. Ross Hagen, who's there. Ernest Wall, George Buck Flowers, who was the hobo in Back to the Future. He's just annoying, like, half the time. Well, I mean, not half the time. I mean, all the time. Like, I don't really... There's, like, one scene I didn't mind him in. Most of the time, he's just obnoxious. Julie Hall is Stoney. She's nice to look at, too, but, I mean, this character, she's basically dead weight. She gets hit in the face early in the film during the backwoods baseball scene, which I have to ask this question. When was this ever a thing where a traveling group of girls, a girls' baseball team, travels cross-country in a bus and plays a game of baseball in the backwoods in the South somewhere in front of a bunch of rednecks and against a team of men who just want to slap them on the ass and cop a feel? Like when was this ever a thing? It seems like a fantasy. It does not seem like it's a real thing. And that's the main basis for why these girls are even here in the first place, and why they end up getting stalked. So it just doesn't seem that plausible. It seems rather unrealistic. But what do I know? I don't live in the South. I don't hang around rednecks. But the rest of the cast, I mean, you got Luke Shay as Mino Collins, who's the main villain. Like, he's the leader of the group of rednecks. He wants revenge over the death of his son. The guy is a poor man's Sam Elliott. Like, he's got the stash, but he doesn't have the charisma. He doesn't have the acting ability. And it shows. There's a reason why he didn't do much of anything other than play one of the new Cenobites in Hellraiser 3. There's a reason why he didn't have that many lines of dialogue in that either. Because he's a shitty actor. Like, he really does not carry that much of a presence. And that's a mistake, because you have a villain who, like, you're saying he's not even... You don't even love to hate him. You don't even hate him. He's just there. It's just a evil aura, I guess, but like nothing that really registers or resonates with you. Gregory Scott Cummins is also in this as his son Roy. I recognize him from Hack-O-Lantern. That movie made me want to hawk up a fucking lung because it's that fucking awful. But I mean, he was bad in that, and he's bad in this. But I will say this about Blood Games: it's not as bad as Hack-O-Lantern, but that's not saying much at all. I mean, it's not that difficult to be not as bad as Hack-O-Lantern. Shelley Abblett plays Donna. She's the tough girl of the group. She has a line of dialogue where she's like, "I've been pushed around by men all my life, and I'm not going to do that anymore. And it's time that I fight back." And she actually strangles, like, hangs a dude. She hangs a George Buck Flowers character, Vern. And she's pretty tough, but that's really all her character is. She's just the tough girl. Like, that's all her character development is. She's just a tough girl. Don Dowe as Holt. He's like painted as like a total bumpkin, and he's bumbling, and then at like after it seems like the main villain Mino gets killed, he's like he's propped up as the villain, the main villain, and it doesn't work because even he admits like, don't kill me, like I won't say anything, blah 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 blah, and it's just a really weak character. And the rest of the cast, I mean, some of the girls, Rhyve Sawyer and Paula Magna and Sabrina Hills, like, and Randi Randolph, I mean, their acting is fine, but it's nothing to really write home about. Like I said, those characters are really interchangeable. Like, it's kind of hard to figure out, like, which is which half the time. Because it just seems like they just came off an assembly line. The score by Greg Turner, just really forgettable. Adds nothing to the movie. No mood, no atmosphere, no nothing. Might as well just be air out of your ass. The editing by Rick Mitchell, it's serviceable, but that's not, I mean, I'm not going to give a film I'm not going to say, oh wow, your editing was serviceable. That's what it should be. Any film that comes out, direct-to-video or not, should have serviceable editing. I mean, that's a given. The pacing, it's like 90 minutes, and there are times where once they get in the woods, it really starts to slow down. I mean, even the kills aren't much of anything. See, that's another thing. It has trying to be built as like a horror movie, but then it doesn't have effective horror elements other than the rape scene. Because other than that, it's just like, oh, a girl gets shot with a crossbow. Another girl gets shot with a crossbow. 2 other girls die, and I don't even remember how they died. And I didn't even remember that they died until I watched until I got to the end of the movie, and it's like they're dead because the girls were out of nowhere, I guess, reminiscing about like the girls that died in the middle of a scene. It was just, that's an example of bad editing, actually, and bad writing and bad directing, because why would you put that there? It's just distracting. It makes it come across as if the girls are like hallucinating or something. The climax, it's not that exciting. It's just Mino, who should have already been dead. He's slowly crawling around, chasing after Babe, who eventually kicks his ass into a grain silo. That's all that is. It's nothing that's really that impressive. And even his death is pretty lame. I mean, he just falls and he lands on something. That's it. Like I said, there's not really any like really good gore. To be honest, there's more blood in the opening titles than there is in the entire movie. And that's another thing I want to mention that I did like. I did like the opening titles, how the titles formed from droplets of blood. I thought that was really cool. But I mean, opening titles aren't like gonna save the movie. It was a good way to start the film and start it off on the right foot, but then it was kind of downhill from there. Overall, I just wasn't a big fan of this. I thought it was pretty forgettable. Below average. I've seen worse than Blood Games. I did have some fun with it, but I didn't have enough fun with it. It was an alright concept and idea, but I personally I definitely feel it was a failure in execution, and should have had some better kills, should have had more suspense and thrills, should have, and it needed to have a much more consistent tone. You can't have a rape scene and then have a guy make a joke about don't let them hypnotize you when he's talking about a girl's tits. Like, you can't do that. That's just an impossible task. And Blood Games doesn't pull it off. Just like there isn't a single film that can pull that off. Because, like I said, it's an impossible task. You cannot do that. So, I don't know what else to say about the film, except if I were rated at 5 stars. I give the movie 2 out of 5. I know it seems like a lot, because it doesn't seem like I really cared for the film that much, but it's because I've seen much worse. The first 30-40 minutes or so I was having some dumb fun with, and then it just went off the rails after that. But, I mean, if you like exploitation films, like survival horror movies, and you like some, exploitation cheesecake movies with like tits and ass, then maybe give it a watch someday. But I wouldn't recommend it to you if you're not really interested in that. I definitely would say skip it. And definitely don't pay too much money for this. Like, don't pay an arm and a leg for the VHS. It's not really worth it. So yeah, that's all I have to say about Blood Games. Thank you for watching my review, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.